just like to welcome Kayla and Francesca to have this little discussion about precious rubbish. So I'll keep it short.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you. And in case people did not know who that lovely gentleman was, that was Dr. Bernard Means, who is a co-director of the Graphics Narratives Lab over at the Humanities Research Center, which this talk is like a part of the events of, and so we're really glad. I'm Francesca Lyn. I'll be the person asking questions. I guess moderation is maybe not the right word, but I'll be the person talking and asking questions. And I guess,
yes, I think I'm going to set a 30-minute timer on my phone, so maybe we'll do 30 minutes of talking and then 30 minutes of Q&A and then a book signing. Does that work for everyone's schedules? Yeah. All right.
Yes, that's perfect.
30 minutes. All right. Siri heard me. Cool. Yes, hi, I'm Kayla. I am a cartoonist. I live in North Carolina, and I'm here with my lovely wife, the little blondie with the glasses back there. That's Laura. So I'm happy to be here. My book comes out officially tomorrow, but y'all can buy it here. Only place you can get it early from Small Friend after the event, and I'll sign it for you and give you free comics and bookmarks and all kinds of treats. So even if you pre-ordered a copy, I recommend getting another copy for a friend.
Yes. I wanted to just kind of dive in about this. I've been a fan of your work for like several years now.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Which is what I saw you've tabled at the Small Press Expo before, and I remember seeing the short form version of this work, also called Precious Rubbish.
That's right. Yes.
And I'm not quiet or particularly shy, and I just started, like, I bought it and just started like yelling about it to people. I was like, have you all seen this? Have you all seen this? Because it looked like nothing I had really ever seen before.
Oh,
and
so
also
cool.
the subject matter was like handled in a way I'd never really seen before. But my first question actually is, I know Precious Rubbish is the name of this book, but it's also the name of just a body of work that you've done that's
right.
memoir related.
Yes.
I was wondering, like, where did the name come from?
Oh, that's such a good question. So there's this mid-century, like, really funny art critic named T.L. Shaw, and he wrote a book called Precious Rubbish that is this like eviscerating critique on the fine art world. And I love it. I don't really identify with things that are like terribly self-serious or pretentious, and so his book just like cuts it down to size and really is like advocating for the elevation of content that the most amount of people respond to as a way to like consider art, like what art is and what art isn't, or what art is valuable and what art isn't valuable. And I think that that name just resonates so much with me in terms of my practice, in terms of this work. There's just the two words together create this wall that's like so difficult to say. There's this like awful alliteration. It's just, there's so much there to unpack with those two words. And yeah, I thank T.L. Shaw in my acknowledgments for the gift of Precious Rubbish, since really it was his genius that combined those words together.
Oh my gosh, yeah, thank you so much for that. And I know in addition to doing cartoon and lots of different kind of cartooning, you are also a multimedia artist.
That's
so
right.
You're creating things, and some of it has maybe very similar iconography in some ways, but also in completely different formats, different sizes. Is there a difference maybe in the kind of reception that the kind of work that you're doing in something such as like maybe cartooning comics versus maybe some of the things that you've done that are more like maybe textile based
right.
or painted?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because I'm so early in my career, I don't know what the reception is yet. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how this book is going to be received. It comes out tomorrow, so like fingers crossed people like it, you know. I've gotten like a couple Goodreads reviews in, mostly good. So that's encouraging. And in terms of the fine art stuff, I've had some of it I've exhibited some of it. Most recently, I had, this sounds very fancy, but I had this big textile piece in a show in Paris. I haven't had anything since, but if anyone is looking to exhibit my art, I am available. Right now it's in a garbage bag in a piece of furniture in my dining room. So yeah, it's not still in Paris.
It's really precious rubbish.
That's exactly right. And the actual quilt, the piece of textile is, so it's called a crazy quilt. Like I use these found antique quilts that were put together usually by women with trash, like just scrap material. And so the crazy quilt that I found at the hospice thrift store off Highway 40 is made of a bunch of really old tattered pieces of fabric to create this like crazy collage that's not mathematically designed. So it's a quilt that just doesn't have that kind of really mathy structure to it. And so I use that, and when I'm working on these pieces, I have a couple pieces that use quilts. I think about it as a collaboration with that creator, and I hand sew the applique on top, and most recently I have a big quilt piece where I hand sewed using other pieces of scrap fabric the words, "Please remember that they never loved you," which is the text on the final page of the book. So that's, like you were saying, the recurring iconography and language and stuff. So I pulled that and made a big textile piece out of that. But yeah, so there are some like very similar, like you noticed, in terms of like conceptually, my thinking of like elevating the low, and I'm not even interested in bringing it up high. Like I don't really care about what's up high. I just want to bring it to be seen. Yeah, so I think that all of my practice to some extent engages with those kinds of ideas. And I do performance work as well, and so the last performance show I did was called Drunk Tank, and it was an exhibition in a hole in the ground that I had painted drunk tank pink, which is a color I use in my work, that like big sickly Pepto pink. And the drunk tank pink was, it's a color that they used for it was like the drunk tank in jails, like for people incarcerated, and it calms them down apparently. Yeah. So I was sitting in my giant Kayla head. I have like a big old Kayla head, and my little baby Kayla, and I was like nursing her with a bottle of beer. And then I had the people who attended the exhibition, they were given shots of vanilla extract and a can of Bud Light in a paper bag, which is how I relapsed. So I relapsed on that exact combination. And so people would like, I got the little party, like drinking, and then I had a sign that said, "Throw your empties in the hole." So then people filled the hole that had a projection of that. It's hard to explain. It's on my website. But so there's a projection of me in the head making my baby self get drunk, and then people would throw liquor trash down there. And so then it filled with like sticky beer, and it like stank, and you have to crawl into this hole to see the show. So very precious rubbish.
This is like, this is great, because one of the benefits of being in front of like a live audience of people is I get to see like reactions to what everyone's saying. And there was a little bit of almost like a laugh, but then descriptions going on, and people were like, I don't know if I should laugh about this. There was like an uneasiness that I love that. That's one of my favorite things, is a little bit of uncomfortability. But it brings me back to like the subject matter of this book, of Precious Rubbish. When I was reading it, I immediately was like, this is so freaking funny. It's so funny.
That's such a compliment.
But then I also described to people, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been talking about this while I get to do this talk with this amazing cartoonist. And they're like, what's the book about? And I would explain what the book is about. And they're like, that sounds
That's not funny.
Horrifying. Yeah. None of these, there's like, what? This is about child abuse. This is about generational trauma. It's about like, even to some degrees, addiction, parents' addiction. What do you mean it's funny? I'm like, it's really funny, guys. There's a lot of jokes in there, and there is a lot of like maybe like revulsion of that, but also appealing of that. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that, and also maybe like how did you find like the funny in this?
That's so astute. I have so much to say. Okay. Let me collect myself. Okay, first of all, I'm delighted that you think it's funny.
I thought it was really funny, y'all.
I'm curious, do you remember, were they the fake ads? ads? Like, were they like the fashion pages, the board game? Like, what made you laugh?
I like the fake ads a lot
fake ads,
because
okay.
I love those. The fashion pages I liked a lot because I also, I don't know, I'm like a huge research nerd anyways, and so like I was like, there's Betty and Veronica in here.
Yes, that's
I did not
right.
expect to see Betty and Veronica
Yes.
in this tragic comic where this poor little girl, all these terrible things happen to her. But then also, I think there's maybe something that I think that's funny about it that maybe harkens back to like the same way. I think another thing we've talked about, mentioned a little bit, is like Peanuts, like the way in which like some of the stuff that happens to Charlie Brown, y'all, it's not really that funny.
It's really
they're
bleak.
so mean to him,
Yeah.
but yet like there's something about it that always made me laugh too.
Yeah,
And so I
yeah.
think there's something in that for me that I like responded to.
Yeah, so I think the humor in the book is really like what it exists or it doesn't exist depending on what the reader brings to the reading of the book. So I have readers, for example, my mentor is this cartoonist named Mark Newgarden, who's like one of my primary influences, and he really helped me understand. He's the person who told me to pitch the book in the first place. It literally would not exist without him. I would still be in isolation, just like not showing anybody. It's just he's so great and so encouraging. But he told me that one of my blurbs is, he said, "This is the scariest book I've ever read."
It's real funny. It's terrifying.
He doesn't think it's funny at all.
Oh,
He
yeah.
says not that. He doesn't think the ads are funny. He doesn't think the fashion pages are funny. He doesn't think any of it's funny. He said there isn't a joke in the entire book. Nothing gives him a ha-ha. He thinks that it's just a train crash from the first page to the end, which I think is fascinating. Because then I can talk to you and you think it's hilarious, and I think both of those readings are just so rich and interesting, and there's so much to unpack with whoever I'm talking to and like what their experience of the book is. But so what I think is funny, okay, so I was saying I think comics is so well suited for how I see my own life. Because it already lacks, I feel like, to a certain degree, a self-seriousness, which I've mentioned before, is that it allows me to explore the horrors of my childhood without alienating my reader with the form that I'm telling the story in. It's this approachable format, you know, and there's just so many different ways that I can like morph and exploit that format to make the work feel even more approachable, which that's like my use of reappropriation of mid-century kids comics, my use of the color palette, and then again my use of like sort of the classic comics humor mechanisms. And so that's one of the ways that I facilitate my jokes, is just by like there's like a symbology of like comics. Like people see it and they're like, you know, okay, so in Surrogate Spouse, there's this one comic where it's really bleak, but like, so it's like the nurse thinks I'm my father's wife, which has really happened. And so I'm like, I go, ack, and I'm like falling back. And you know, it's like that thing that's in comics. I don't know the right word for it. I can't think of the word, but like I'm able to communicate a sickness and a really twisted sense of humor to a scenario like that, using that kind of comics language as a tool to facilitate that. But I also just think like a lot of the stuff that happened to me is just quite funny. Like, for example, my biological mother is just like, she's a nut. Like, she's buck wild. I didn't have to exaggerate literally anything about her for this book, which might be hard to believe. And it's just like the last time I saw her, she made me rub her feet, and then she said goodbye to me wearing a dirty diaper. Like, come on. Like, that's fucking funny to me. I don't know. It's sad. It's tragic. It's, like, really bleak. But the image of it, like, after I cry and I grieve and I, like, go to PTSD therapy or whatever, I think afterwards I can step away from it and be like, the absurdity of the horror, it just tickles me pink. You know? So I just think some of it's funny. And I also am really interested in the unintended impact of the humor that I see in the work. Like, I'm not trying to be funny most of the time. It's just the way I'm telling the story. So if you think it's funny, that's amazing. And if you don't, that's also valid. But yeah, I am interested in the discomfort that generates in the body. Like, I think making work that, like, facilitates an embodied response is just so compelling to me. And, like, what a intimacy that can be created with the author and the reader that is so rich and meaningful. Whether it's pain or grief or discomfort or humor, I'm interested in all of that range of emotion, and I am finding that the work is able to generate those kinds of responses in readers.
Yeah, I think it is also very fascinating because it is very much like, you know, a memoir. We know that this is a true story, but then the way in which you've chosen to stylize everything is so highly stylized that there is also that added distance of it. And then on top of that, there's like, y'all, there's like a word search in here. There's like a crossword puzzle. I'm like doing and I think that also like made me laugh too. I'm looking at this word search, which is very much like a little kid's word search, but the words are all like abuse, transgenerational trauma, things like that. And I was like, this is hilarious and genius. But then, so there's also all of these devices interspersed throughout the story, which I guess makes me want to ask some of these other questions, like, how did you decide how to tell this story in this? Because I know I'm familiar with similar or even like reprinted versions of this work, which was like in series, like in smaller ones. But this is like something else because it's combining that and more. Like, how did you decide like what to be in this Precious Rubbish, I guess the long form?
Right. Bernard, would you mind handing me a copy of my book from my table, if you don't mind? Sometimes it's easier for me to like point to the pages to show you what I'm talking about. So the genesis of this work is actually like just so weird. It was 2013. I graduated from college. I moved back to Texas, where I'm from. And I was going through this period where I was feeling really self-conscious about like the physical art making that I was doing. And I was in college, I was making like huge paintings and sculptures and puppets that, like paper puppets, but they were like the top of the high ceilings of my art building, and they went all the way down past the floor. Just massive objects. And after college, I was sort of like on my way towards my bottom. I'm in recovery for addiction. I identify as an alcoholic and an addict. And at the time, I just was like circling the drain and feeling very bad about myself. I was like living at my bio dad's house, which is just like where like all the shit in this book took place, you know? So it's not really a fun place to go after you graduate from college. And I ended up disposing of all of my college art because I just felt so low and guilty about like these objects taking up space. Thank you, Bernard, for bringing me the book. And what happened next was I was feeling still this sort of compulsion to make art, which is just, I guess I was born that way. And I used my computer. I was able to acquire the Adobe programs, and I was teaching myself graphic design through YouTube at the time to try and have a job, to figure out how do I use this art degree to make a living, because I don't have a trust fund, so I've got to learn a skill. So I taught myself graphic design, and at the same time I started drawing comics with Illustrator because it had no physical footprint. And at the time I was able to be private with the work and like do it on a computer where no one could see it. I'm at my dad's house, and it's just like I don't have autonomy in any way, and I don't want my work to take up space in any way, and it was perfect. And so I had like this imagery swirling around in my head because I'm a collector, and I was starting to really collect images from the public domain. So I had built this archive of thousands of images from mid-century children's comics, just downloading the pages and just studying them because I'm a comics nerd. And so from that came the inspiration to just start making these comics for no purpose. It's not like I was like, I'm going to be a cartoonist and put this in a book. It was just me in Texas in that nasty bedroom, feeling real bad, popping codeine and drinking vodka, and working on my little laptop. And that is where this page came from. this one right here. This was the very first Precious Rubbish comic I ever made, and that is the context in which I made it. And I had no intention of doing anything with it. It just came organically out of the desperate pain that I was in at the time. And so this series, so pages 2 through, I think it's 10, 2 through 10. There's an excerpt of these pages at thenewyorker.com. You're welcome to go check it out. But so these pages came from that time where it was just this totally unself-conscious exploration of what happened to me. And I had no language. I didn't know that I was a survivor of incest at the time. I sure as hell didn't know I was an alcoholic. I didn't even know I was a lesbian. I mean, I was really in a lot of denial. You know, I was like in relation with my biological family, that they were my entire world, and I was making this work. So that's how it started. And I continued to make this work as my life changed and eventually got a lot better. I just kept making Precious Rubbish, but without any ambition at all. And I was putting together these comics and sending them to my mentors. I have like comics mentors who like really have helped me understand the form and like guided my practice really in like a kind of a pure way. Like it was just like, because I wanted to be a better cartoonist. And so after years into my recovery, as a sober person, I'd already come out, I'd moved away from my bio family, I started dating my now wife, like life was getting good. And that's when I physically was able to meet Mark Newgarden for the first time. And I remember him like talking to me about my work, and he was like, Kayla, you have a book, like you should pitch this. And blew my mind. I was like, what, dude? Like, oh my God. He was like, for 10 years, you've been writing this book and sending it to me. Like, you should pitch it. And so that is where that was my light bulb moment for me. And that's when I collected all of these comics that I had made over the course of, at that time, it was about 8 years, and put them into a PDF and pitched it to Fantagraphics. And Eric acquired the book. And then from there, it just became like filling it in. And at the same time, I was in therapy, deciding to go formally no contact with my biological family. And so those two things were happening in tandem. So the work, as I was editing it and adding new material, it was becoming clearer and more honest. And I was feeling more and more willing and ready to tell this story. So it was actively evolving as I was healing, which I think is really interesting. Yeah.
And maybe like an important thing for a book like this to exist, for that to have had to have happened. Because I will say that there is an interesting thing that you do maybe with like the breaks in between in parts of it. First of all, there's like a lot of interesting like just like disjunctures and like incomplete stories in here that I really like loved and responded to. But there's also like, there's parts where like you have recipes that are just like vegan recipes for things that I want to make like in between.
Oh yeah, you want to make it?
I want to make like
all
of those things.
I'm
not even vegan. I don't know like why I need to know this, but now I'm like, oh, but I was thinking like, oh, that's like maybe like these little like breaks. I'm like, I feel like those are the recipes of a healed person in between.
I like that.
Yeah, but maybe that's what my interpretation was, but I was like, I felt like it was really important and then it like goes immediately back into like the worst thing that's ever could happen to the cutest little like lumpy faced character that I've already like become. Yeah, and so I thought that was like a really interesting, I was wondering what you could tell us about like, these breaks and these gaps that are like more than even just like the between panel to panel breaks. There's like little like fragments.
Yeah, God, that is so cool. I just like, that's the first time I've ever heard anything like that. So that reading is just like beautiful to me. And wasn't, because like I'm not a meticulous planner when it comes to the creation of this work. Like it's very instinct based. Like it's really entirely instinct based. I just go sort of where the urge is taking me, and I don't think about it too much. I just sort of trust that if the vibe is right, then it's going to work, and that is kind of how the book turned out, and I feel like it works for me, and so I've started to really trust that feeling. But so in those recipe pages, I think that's I mean, you're absolutely right, because like I remember those recipes came from like living with my wife Laura and me like trying to woo her over by like making her vegan tacos. Like literally, like that's where those recipes came from. And I wrote those and I made those like just when we were building a life together, just to make them. You know, not for, that wasn't something I made later when I knew it was going to be a book. It was just like reflective of that moment. So that's so beautiful that you picked up on that. I never thought of it that way. But I think that comics, again, as a form, it's just so perfect for telling these kinds of stories because, like, again, as you're saying, like, you're thinking about, like, the gaps in narrative and the gaps between the stories, like, mirrors the gaps between panels, and, like, I use those gaps to represent the holes in my memory, and it's just this, like, you just get small, then bigger, 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 and it's, like, all... It's just this world of investigating trauma that like is so interesting and effective at trying to make sense of abuse-fractured memory and that relationship between the healed artist and the traumatized person that she was, still is, but mostly was, and what that looks like. So I think that's something I definitely want to chew on more. And I've been told that the fashion pages, Mark Newgarden said that he thinks they're terrifying. And then another reader told me that they see those fashion pages as glimpses into the artist now and who she is now, and that this is like a flash into the future to see that she's alive and doing okay, which I thought was just like really sweet. And again, wasn't my intention. I like drawing fashion pages.
Yeah, I honestly thought it because I was like, no one's making little Kayla in this, like these nice vegan meals. So someone else is making her. And then I was like, oh,
Kayla.
She's making them maybe for herself or other people
wow.
in the future. Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, that, which I think maybe made it a little easier to read some of the most horrific things because I was just like, oh, there's a way out of here.
There's a way out.
And it has like these this at least delicious food is a part of it.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah, that was
definitely is
that.
now.
Yeah, that to me.
That is
like,
so beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
That really did like give me a lot of like pause when I was looking at it. I do want to get back to, I called her like the little lumpy face girl. I fell in love with her but I was also like, I wondered if you could talk and tell. I know that there's a lot of other artists and people in this room right now that maybe want to talk about like character design and those kind of things. How did you land on the way she's a very particular look?
She does, yes, and that face is like a sticker, and it's just copy and pasted.
Oh.
Yeah, I have a really unusual process, which if you want to talk about it, we can, but it's very strange. Probably not that helpful. But so Kayla, the reason she looks the way she did was, I think, in college, I drew my very first Kayla self-portrait. And it was this comic called Kayla's Day In, and it was huge. I used to make really big physical comics. Like, this book doesn't exist, like, outside of the book form. Like, it's digital, it's in the cloud. But I started out as a pen and ink cartoonist, like traditional, you know, I had my nibs and my favorite inks and blah, blah, blah. And I had this my self-portrait character, and I was really interested in the performance aspect of my practice, and I was really into Paul McCarthy, and not Paul McCartney, Paul McCarthy.
Yeah.
I get the names mixed up, but they're very different people.
Not the Beatle.
Exactly. He makes this sick, twisted, absolutely hideous, awful, violent, vile art that I loved at the time.
I'm also a big fan.
I really loved his work at the time. And so I made my own big Kayla head, and then I drew my Kayla cartoon character with my big Kayla head. And that's where the big Kayla, big nose, that angle, that was where I first drew it. I'm always at that angle, that sort of three-quarter, you see one eye, bit of the other cheek, very lumpy. The hair's lumpy, it's all lumps. When I build it out of paper mache, it's like a lump sculpture. And so that was the first time I ever drew her. And then when I was a senior, my thesis was called Kayla TV. And so I had just done all these different iterations of Kayla and was experimenting with Kayla and physical embodied Kayla and what I wore when I was Kayla, and I would make GIFs of Kayla doing things. And then I would paint her, I would draw her, I would make comics with her. And so I just was really interested in figuring out who she was and how she looked. And so when it came time for me to transition into digital art, and I was like working on this stuff, like Kayla popped out fully formed in this very first drawing I did of her where she's dead. She dies by suicide here with pills. When I was a kid, I attempted suicide at 10. That was the first time I had ever tried. And so that's sort of the memory that I was investigating with this piece. And bam, there's the Kayla head, which has changed very little in 12 years. I've like done a couple updates to her as I've become a better illustrator, and you know, tweaked it here and there, but by and large, it's the same, it's that Kayla head. She just came fully formed, like divine inspiration from God. Yeah, there she was, and there she stays.
Yeah, and then I have to ask about, there's a very limited, very distinctive color palette throughout.
Yes, that's right.
How did you land on this? Like, a lot of it is this, and I'm glad we have so many screens so
I know,
we can see
it's
all
crazy.
of it.
It's so weird.
A lot of it rests like within the realm of like primary colors, although there are like deviations. I wonder if you could speak more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very distinctive.
I was so excited when I came in here and saw the quality of the projected images, because it's like exactly accurate. Like this is how the colors are supposed to look, and I'm just an absolute maniac about color management in my files. So just the technical side of it, every single instance of every single color is the exact same CMYK values throughout the entire book in the digital files. So if you see any variation, that's not on me, that's a printer issue. In the digital files, you want to just do a little dropper and check. Literally every blue throughout the entire book is the same CMYK. It's been 30 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
How are y'all feeling?
Yes,
Are we good? Should we
questions.
extend it another 10 minutes? 15?
Yeah.
Wait, 10?
Because I could talk forever, y'all, so don't let me do that. Don't let me do it.
10 minutes. All right, we're going to check in 10 minutes. Feel free to leave if you need to go. Like, everybody's got a life, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the color palette, I just am very obsessive. I'm a graphic designer by trade, so I just like am always thinking about the quality of my files and how they're set up, and how just to make it as simple a process as possible to send it to the printer and hope they do the right thing. So yeah, I just am really nutso about it. And so the palette, like where it originated from, was again, like I see it as sort of divine inspiration at the time, because it's just a choice. I just say it is. Feels good. And at the time when I first started drawing these Precious Rubbish pages, like the palette just presented itself to me. And it just kind of came as I was building out that page in particular is where I selected, by and large, like the main color blocks. And I also was collecting these things called comic cards with a K. And there are these mid-century mass-produced like travel novelty postcards that would have like a stamp for the different cities they were sold in, but they looked like, they were printed to look like wood. They were like faux wood on cardboard. They had like little jagged edges and like fake little wood design, and then they would have these single panel gag cartoons on them. And the thing that I love the most about them was that there was no 100% K, like no black in the art.
Okay.
All the line was blue. And it just like, it scratched an itch in my art brain that I was just like, I found it so satisfying that there's nowhere to land. There's no resting place. You're just like, kind of, I feel like you're just like slipping and sliding. You can't like get cozy in the art, you know? Like I feel like your eye will like settle in on the darkest place and, you know, just kind of let that be a place of rest. And I thought it would be really interesting to just, you know, withhold that from the work. I feel like it does something really particular and nauseating when you read the book. And I've been told that the yellow has made a reader like really uncomfortable. Like she told me that it made her physically nauseous, the yellow in the book. And when I sat and I talked to her in person about it, and I was like, you know, that's actually like that's the color I used for my childhood bedroom. And it was like, oh, you know, I think maybe subconsciously, like, so here's my little kid bedroom here. It's that huge swath of this like rich yellow, which the first time I used the yellow, it had a little bit less red in it and a little more blue. And then I decided like about 2 years ago to change the levels and the values to make it a little bit more goldenroddy kind of. But I think that it kind of pops forward. Like I feel like all the colors are competing forward,
Yes.
like they're coming at you, you know? Especially when the red and blue are next to each other, it creates some crazy vibrations that I think are wild and intense and kind of terrible. But yeah, so I have this set color palette and I never deviate from it. I never ever do. And even in my next book that I'm working on, I'm sticking with that color palette.
Yeah, yes, this might not be a fully formed question, but I was just reminded of the first time I actually spoke to you and I picked everything up. Immediately the first thing you went, these are not for kids. These are not for kids.
I'm glad I said that.
These are not for kids. They're about and I was a little bit like, well, damn, I'm not a kid. Like what? like I'm not a kid. Like okay, but you said that, and then I always will remember that. But then also I happened to, when I was preparing for this talk and just reading the book, you do think Charles Schulz at the end of your book, and I just thought, okay, what is maybe the connection or unconnection or
There's
not
a connection
with and people that are not like comics. Well, I guess people ever he's like the most famous cartoonist ever lived. Peanuts, Snoopy, we know him and love him, right? Like what's the connection there?
I'm so glad you asked. I am just delighted to answer this question. I have a very intimate connection with Charles Schulz, or in my mind, the spirit of Charles Schulz, because I never knew the man, but I feel like his ghost and I are in communion with one another. So after Mark Newgarden had told me, pitch this book, Kayla, I was like hustling at the time, like just like taking every freelance gig I could. Before I got my full-time job now, I was freelancing, which is helpful in early sobriety because like you can't, it's just hard to live, so freelancing allows you to set your own schedule and whatnot. But I was taking as many jobs as I could, and I was just working a lot. And I was like feeling like rather stressed, like how am I gonna have time to like finish writing this book while I'm working literally round the clock 7 days a week. And my wife and I are real junkers, and we like to go around and like junk for stuff at trash stores. And we went to this one big antique store, and these little strips hanging on the wall caught our eye, and we were like, oh wow, look, it's peanut strips. And I was like, I love peanuts, it's just brilliant, great stuff. And so we go and we pick them up, and it's like $30 a piece, and I'm like, that's kind of steep for a print, but not bad. So we put them in our cart, and like we're wheeling it around the antique store, and I hold it closer, and I'm like, baby, there are pencil lines on these prints.
Oh, the dream.
And I put it into the light, and I see like the texture of the ink dry, and there's like a crease. He folded his comics in half, and so there's a crease right in the middle, and it's got his signature. I fucking freaked out, and there were two, and they were $30 a piece. So we put them in our little cart. We like casually go to the checkout stand, and I come up with this stupid lie where I was asking the lady, I was like, oh, I found these peanuts things, and my family member who really loves peanuts, so we're gonna give it to him for Christmas. Do you know where they came from? Are there any more? I want to just give my mother-in-law all the peanuts. I don't think she reads peanuts. And the woman was like, no, unfortunately, a little old man came and just dropped them off on consignment and left, and like that's all he had. So we bought these comics, and then I don't know why I'm talking about Mark Newgarden so much. Like, I'm not obsessed with him, but he just is coming up a lot in these questions. He advised me, he told me how to sell it. He was like, you need to get this appraised at Heritage Auctions, and you need to sell it, and here's the guy you talk to. So he put me in touch with this guy. I got it appraised, and it sold an auction for $13,000, which immediately overnight doubled my income. Like, put my wife and I in that like a whole another Obamacare bracket. Like, it just like changed everything. And it gave me the time and space to take less work and to finish my book. Like, he literally gave me the means to finish my book, which is why I use that language I say, thank you to the spirit of Charles Schulz for giving me the means to finish this book. Because that's literally what he did. And I have another one that we have an original peanut strip in our house, which is so dope. And it's the one that we liked more than the other. And who knows, I think it's like, look, right now it's like, about like in the 20s. It's looking like it might sell for us, so we'll just hang on to it unless something really bad comes out about Charles Schulz, which fingers not cross it.
Unlikely.
Hopefully. Hopefully, right?
Unlikely at this point, probably.
Hopefully. Yeah, I really, really, really like him, and I'd like him to stay a hero.
Yeah, well, that was a much better story than I could have ever expected.
Amazing that you asked it.
I'm just a big fan as well, and I was like, I have to ask because it was such an interesting language. I was like, does she know his ghost? Like, what's happening?
I agonized over that language, like every
but no,
word.
I think it was very, and that was really great.
That's so cool that you noticed that.
Yeah. I think I have
A minute 38.
we have a minute 38. That's too much pressure. I guess. What's maybe next? Maybe like
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a book about trauma. So much trauma, all the different traumas that I've experienced, which is everything, y'all. Like, Francesca kind of like listed some of the things, but I had a very hard life until I got sober and came out and you know, built a cozy life with my wife. So this book is, I'm interested in really just kind of exclusively exploring the impact of that pain, the impact of like the spiritual abuse from my upbringing in the Pentecostal church. And so what comes next is comics from the perspective of the healed person and not from the perspective of the traumatized person, even though the healed person was overseeing that perspective. That I really was very intentional about withholding hope, real explicit hope. And so the next book, it's like not going to be cheesy. I mean, it's still pretty bleak, but it definitely investigates my really bizarre and kind of like esoteric spiritual practice. That's just like the bulk of my entire existence. It's like all I think about and do. And so I'm making comics about that. And the little comics, so y'all please buy the book because I will give you this little mini comic that's called They Never Loved You. And it tells the story of my spiritual practice. And it's an excerpt of my forthcoming book that you'll get a sneak peek of that only you guys will get to see if you buy the book here or any other stop on my tour. But yeah, so I've got about 70 pages of mess right now that I'm sort of investigating and putting together, and it's coming out very quickly and it's coming out very easily. I'm thoroughly enjoying the creation of this new work. It is so fun, whereas this was torture. It was actually torture. It was horrible to make, very bad. So this is different. Yeah.
Well, yes. Now we probably have some time for some questions.
Yeah,
right?
I'm totally down.
Questions?
Yeah. Any and all.
Any
Let me set a timer. Hold on.
Yeah.
30 minutes.
Brian? Yeah, go ahead.
30
I was
minutes.
just letting you- obviously, comics have like a huge history with like swipes, taking from other comics. And it's fun to see the side by sides. And I didn't look at any of these side by sides up, but I noticed in your book that you have like a bibliography.
Yes, that's right.
Like, I was even surprised, even when I first read the book, that on the back cover you even are giving credit.
Yeah.
I was like,
Oh,
wow.
yeah.
That too. Yeah.
But I was interested, you know, a lot of, you know, from Ed Piskor or Daniel Clowes, like people who are famous who take like large, you know, they love to swipe and it's kind of like a fun game for maybe our other readers, but you kind of have, you get the answer key. So I was kind of curious in like your importance in giving that credit or reference in your comments.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and really good eye. So I see the reappropriation of this material as central to the meaning of the work. So I'm not like lifting it. I'm lifting it because it means something to lift it, and I want to clue the reader in on that, and I want the reader to know that as much as they want to know it. You don't have to read the endnotes, but you can. And I feel like the work is in dialogue with this sort of foundational stuff that I'm referencing, because I'm not just like looking at it and redrawing it. I'm drawing over it. Like I'm literally drawing over this work. Like I'm embodying this work. It is the meat of Precious Rubbish. It is Precious Rubbish. Like this just is basically like a collection of reimagined archival comics ads and comics and games and puzzles. Like literally, I think almost every page is, it's not just an homage, it's like I don't know. It's just like almost a collaboration. I see, which I think is just really, it's really interesting to me because of my relationship with this work and how fraught, but also how fun that relationship is. Because Betty and Veronica just like haunted me as a little girl. Like their bodies like literally like triggered disordered eating for me at age 10. Like it was a lot of other factors too, of course, like there being only ice cream in the freezer, so what are you going to eat for dinner? That certainly isn't going to help create a healthy relationship with food, but their bodies, just that world and their clothes and the whole universe of Betty and Veronica and Archie comics was so disturbing to my child brain because of the contrast. Like looking at my trailer, looking at Riverdale, like, oh, something's wrong with me, I have shame now, you know?
Yeah, especially the ones that were maybe still coming out back then, where like, I think now they've done things where like maybe they have real problems, but like back then, there's no problems in the world of Archie. It's so
it was
cute.
just the love triangle.
Yeah,
that was
it
like
was just
the
like,
worst
that
thing.
was the most worst thing, and it always worked out. Like they were all
Always worked
somehow
out.
never not that mad at each other at the end.
Yeah.
And I really liked the way that you approached like because it seemed like you were appropriating it, adding it, but you weren't necessarily asking us as the reader to be like, now you have to take Betty and Veronica seriously.
No,
it's unquestionably serious because it's part of like Lil Kayla's world.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't. The extra textual stuff is optional. I think that the work. My aim is for any reader at any literacy level, whether that's like with literature or with comics, can enter the work and connect with it. From any background, any age, culturally diverse. I really do see it that way, because like we all have trauma. And so I don't want that to feel intimidating to a potential readership, that like, oh no, do I need to like be a comic scholar to be able to understand this? Do I need to know all the references? Like no, like literally just you can look at the pictures and not even read it, and I feel like there's a valuable connection to be made with that kind of relationship with the text. And I just want there to be passages like secret trap doors that if you want to, there's so much in this book that you can open the trap door and fall into. There are probably 100 of them that I've set up in the book. If you want to follow the rabbit down the rabbit hole, you can, if that's your thing. But again, you don't need to have that level of commitment, I think, to be able to engage with the work and even sort of like cursory, meaningful way.
Other questions?
It's a bit of a character design question, but the only characters we see that have eyes in the book are Kayla and I think the nun and the...
Look at you! Wow! Yeah, she's a witch. She's a witch.
Oh, witch, yeah. And then I understand, like the father kind of reminds me of Andy Capp, and so I think it has. That,
wow! Not even intentional. Holy shit, dude! He looks just like Andy Capp.
He does, yeah.
I was obsessed with those when I was a kid. Oh my god, that's so cool.
Well, I was curious about, like, I know that some of it is like just the aesthetics that you're working in.
Yeah, yeah.
But I also was wondering, like, we never see any eyes or faces.
Right.
Is that a way to like take away their power?
Oh, yes, dude. Literally. Yeah. I also, okay. So my interest in that decision is that it creates the almost 200-page book where like the only character you can really project yourself onto or identify with is my child self. And like that's literally what I was deprived of in my childhood, was like anyone seeing me, anyone thinking about me, anyone caring for me, anyone noticing me. So like it's this sort of like conceptual experiment, I think, of just like shrouding my abusers, like literally just hiding them. They don't have names, they don't have really any identifiable characteristics. You don't know anything about them except that they are psychopaths, which is all that you need to know about them. You know, like who cares like how they really dress or like what their favorite colors are. But it matters about little Kayla. So you know those things about her, and you see her face. You don't see her whole face. I'm not giving you everything, but that is what you get. And I hope that the reader is able to more closely identify with her through that sort of tactic. And I also love the visual language of that and sort of what it is recalling, like specifically Chris Ware's use of like the shrouded face and like the and fucking Peanuts, how like the adult, like you don't see the adults.
I've never seen an adult.
You don't hear their voices. It's like, rah, 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 you know, like somebody mentioned that 2 days ago at a reading, and I was like, that is literally like your Andy Capp connection, just like absolutely brilliant. And I was like, that's exactly right. Like you don't, like what's my mom's face look like? We don't know. Does she have no, she doesn't have my nose now because she's white. But yeah, you just, you don't get to see it. And sometimes I'm like not even in the mood to like draw like these like nasty pedophiles' bodies, so like I just don't draw their bodies. Like I just do like little lumpy swirls, because like I copy and paste the head and then I do a little, because like fuck them. Like I literally, they don't deserve the time of like outfit, color choice. Like I don't want to draw them. They don't deserve to be drawn. So that's sort of what's happening when I'm making these decisions. And so like for example the like little goopy men thing, I think is it farther along we understand why? Yes, page 94 and 95 in the book. So like my dad is the antagonist of this story, and he's just this like ridiculous blobby guy. Like I know how to draw, but that's a choice, you know? And then here I am in my like badass dress with like white outline and like crazy swirly hair. And I get that attention. I'm giving myself that attention. Yeah, excellent question. Cool.
I'm still stuck on the Andy Capp thing because I remember loving him, but then also thinking now, like imagine explaining to someone like a kid today of like the premise of Andy Capp, and they'd be like, you all like this comic that was just this drunk man? Yeah. Like that was the whole premise? And it's like, no, but I think no, a lot of that was like, it's funny, I thought it was genius, but if we actually lived in Andy Capp's world, we probably wouldn't like it very much.
That's so true. That's so true. That was the character on the Hot Fries, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I was addicted to those as a kid.
Yes.
Oh my God. I would house those like honey buns, and I've just never even made that connection. Like, I need to, maybe I should introduce
also,
that. In
like just the strip
work.
was just him being
Yes.
drunk places and hiding from his wife. Like that was it. And I mean, there's maybe more to it than that, and I actually really appreciate and like that. But it's like today we'd be like, this is a harder sell.
Comics are amazing.
Yeah,
though.
comics are incredible.
Wow.
Other questions?
This is a much less intelligent question, but I was struck by this, and it maybe reminded me of something, and I think I figured out what it reminds me of, but I'm just wondering if you had any connection to this Bazooka Joe comics?
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Absolutely. Did Mark Newgarden work on those?
Yeah.
I literally
Yeah, that
think
makes
he
sense.
did, so yeah.
The
That,
colors too.
it's literally like a very astute fucking point and question. Wow. Yeah, smarter than you give yourself credit for.
From there,
I
but
mean,
it's-
I-
it's
so-
crazy.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, yeah, I think maybe also too, I responded because it reminded me of like my like, you know, lower middle class to lower class childhood of being like, okay, these are the colors of Wonder Bread.
Yes.
These are the colors of like things that like my dad used to deliver as like a milk delivery guy. Like,
Yeah.
like
Wow,
those
your dad was a
primary
milk
colors.
delivery guy?
Yeah, it sounds very cool and old timey. It's just
Yes,
you
it's
just drive
so
a truck.
old-timey.
It's not
Yeah.
very cool. You
I'm
just
sure
like
it's not
drive a truck
glamorous.
and
Yeah.
you fill up the milk at a 7-Eleven. It's actually like not that great.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, it's just buck wild that you bring up Bazooka Joe. And I've never, okay. So when I was a kid, so my family hails from South Texas, my Mexican side of the family. And so we used to go down to the valley because that's like the motherland. And when I was down there, that's where the Circle K was, the gas station. And that was the only place I could find my Bazooka Joes. And so whenever we would go down in the valley, I would literally stock up on my Bazooka Joes. I didn't give a shit about the gum. It's like not that good. The comics were just high art. I mean, literally a genius was writing them, so it makes sense. Yeah, wow, this is great, y'all. This is really cool. Any other genius questions? No, they don't have to be genius. Any question is fine. Yes.
Well, first off, this is my first opportunity to kind of experience your work, so this is a
Cool.
great opportunity. I'm so happy to be here. But my question for you is, you talk about this process and collection in comics, right? It's a language that you're translating these emotions and feelings. I guess, how do you feel about getting to make in production, I guess, like these physical copies that kind of share out your work?
What a good question.
Very good question, and it is just like such a strange, unique, and unexpected experience, because the making of the work, like I had mentioned to y'all, was just in absolute isolation. It was so lonely, and I had no idea what to expect once I'd made the decision and I had felt sort of like spiritually ready to share this work. I'd become like distanced enough from my biological family to where I felt safe sharing their secrets. So a lot of things had to happen before I got there, and a lot of pain had to be felt before I got there. And I wasn't sure, like, so it's pain to make it, is it gonna be pain to share it? Like, that's kind of what I expected. And so once I sold the book to Fantagraphics, I decided to start selling the work as mini comics. So that's like, I think when you encountered it. I was taking excerpts, making it black and white, and then I was traveling around going to the fest circuit for the first time ever. And my idea was to kind of lay the groundwork to try and build a readership for the book that would come out like 4 years later. So I spent like those 4 years doing that work. And that is where I learned for the first time what it looks like when someone reads my work and what it feels like when someone tells me what it felt like to read my work. And it was entirely transformational. And again, I wasn't expecting anything. I thought it was just gonna be bad, you know, like bad, like not good, because nothing about this has really felt healing. The work isn't therapy for me. Making this is not therapy in any way. And it was just like a literal fucking miracle happens almost every time that I table. Strangers are attracted to the colors, you know, something sort of innocuous like that. The imagery draws them in. They don't know they're getting into content about alcoholism and child abuse. They don't know until they read the content warning at the top of my mini comics. And then they flip through it, and there's like, I literally can witness the mirroring process happening. And it is so beautiful, heartbreaking, like absolutely devastating. And when it was first starting to happen, like I would have people disclose to me, like there's this one that I think about the most, that I'll probably carry with me for the rest of my life. It was early in my tabling experience where this guy, he was a long haul trucker who had stopped in Columbus when I was tabling there and had come to my table and read my comics and disclosed to me that he was a survivor and had never said that out loud. And like, that's a big fucking deal. Like, that's really heavy. And like, I really held that for him in a way that I think was too much for me. And I've since learned better boundaries, emotional boundaries with these encounters. But I think it's actually important that it hit me as deeply as it did, because I like was so moving and sad and beautiful. And like, I like hugged him, and we were crying. And like afterwards, he left, and I had to go literally under my table, because like, where are you gonna go? You're like, when you're at these things, it's like table upon table, like stacked, and then there's like tables behind you, so like you're having a panic attack. How do you leave discreetly? You can't. So I go under my table, and I had a panic attack, and I was able to sort of like feel my feelings and find my stabilize, and then literally the next day his wife came. Because that night he disclosed to her, and he had never told her that, and she had no idea. And like, dog, like that's fucking intense. Like that's beautiful. That's big. Like that's big, big. And so she wanted to come and thank me. Like literally came, found me, thanked me, hugged me, and left. And like from that point forward, I was like, oh, this is why I did this. Like, this is why I wrote this book for 10 years without knowing why. This is my purpose in life, is to speak truth to what happened to me and to share that language with other people so that then they can speak truth or think truth to what happened to them. And that is the key to unlocking any potential recovery in my experience, is that first step of acknowledgement, of recognition, of admitting that this happened to me. And I just don't take that for granted. I really don't. I am so thankful for that man's vulnerability, for his willingness to engage with this work. He wasn't even a comics reader. He just was home from like a trip and was like near the library and came into the library in Columbus, and like, it's so crazy. And a big part of my recovery practice is trying to like be of service to people, but I'm kind of a little bit of a hermit, really a hermit, and I don't like to leave the house. And so I think up until now, I've really struggled with like how can I be of service? Like, how can I like keep myself safe and like protect my spirit and my time and my energy and still like be there for people in a meaningful way? And this work, I've learned, is how I do that, by even just like doing things like this and like learning how to talk about what happened to me without like, I'm okay. I'm not gonna go back to my hotel and have a breakdown. Like, I'm good. Like, I have emotional, spiritual boundaries with sharing about this stuff. But I do know that like the more I do this, the more I speak, the more potential reach the work has, which means the more people it has the potential to help. But that's what's happened, and yeah, that's a really thoughtful question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank y'all for having me. 7:03. If y'all gotta go, don't worry about it. It's cool. But also you should stay because you can buy a book. Yes. Hi, wife.
Can I just offer a small correction?
What did I say? Oh my God.
About the Schultz. You said that we got it from a little old man on consignment, which would be extremely sad.
Oh no, he wasn't there.
We got it. It was the reason we couldn't find it is because it was a store booth that buys lots and upsells them.
Right. So
So
he sold it to the store.
Yeah, but they didn't have like record of where they got it.
Uh-huh.
That's why we couldn't find more.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's
We were not
happy
exploiting
story.
an old man.
Yeah.
Right.
We're just like,
Oh
haha.
man.
Yeah.
No, we really. It's like.
Happy story. Kayla's a
Yeah.
good person.
I'm sober now. I don't want to have to make amends. That's a whole messy thing. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. We did right. We did right by that. It was priced at $30, so we bought it, That was it. Thank you, babe. Any more questions, or do we want to buy some books, get it signed, get some free comics? I'll write you a note. Are we good?
Yeah. Well.
Any burning desires?
Yeah, well, I guess thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Yes, and thank you, thank you so much, Kayla. This
My
book,
honor.
which comes out officially tomorrow, but we have many copies people can buy right now.
That's
yes, Yes, thank you so much.
My pleasure, really, truly.
Really
Thank
great.
you so much
Yeah,
for having me. And
thank
thank you,
you.
Rae, for setting this whole